Did you know that in the early 1900s there were more electric cars in the U.S. than gasoline cars? It's hard to believe since gasoline cars dominate today. Gas and diesel engines have been around for almost 150 years, but their days are numbered for the internal combustion engine. Governments around the world are increasingly scrutinizing environmental standards and car emissions, and many countries have committed to ending the production of cars with internal combustion engines by 2030. Car manufacturers and consumers have been giving more attention to alternative engines. There are a few types of electric vehicles, but today we'll look at the pure electric vehicles, or battery electric vehicles, called BEVs. Pure electric car is very different from an internal combustion engine car. It generally requires less details and has a more simplistic design. That's because this type of EV doesn't have a complex gearbox nor an internal combustion engine. That means there are no fuel tanks, exhaust pipes, or fuel supply systems. What it does have is an inverter and an electric motor, which can work as a generator. It also has a battery unit. It is located at the floor of the car, which means the car has a low center of gravity, which in turn increases the stability and maneuverability of the car. The heating system is not connected to the engine, it's autonomous. An EV is powered by an electric motor that uses energy stored in the batteries. EVs use one or more electric motors. For example, one motor with a gearbox for lower RPMs, like when you're in the city, and a second electric motor with a gearbox for higher RPMs, when you hit the highway. The internal computer selects the motor that's most efficient for any given situation. In other words, whatever speed and acceleration you're at. Most people know that electric motors don't emit harmful emissions, but it has yet another advantage. Did you know that they also have higher energy efficiency? For example, an electric motor has an efficiency of up to 95%. This efficiency is released energy used to create torque. Compare that to a diesel engine, which can be up to 45% efficient, and a gasoline engine, which can be only up to 25% efficient. So you can see that an electric car is over 4 times more efficient at turning energy into motion compared to a gas car. This is one way the electric motor outperforms the internal combustion engines. Would it surprise you to know that the electric car actually existed before the internal combustion engine? Back in 1828, the Hungarian inventor Ányos Jedlik made an electrically powered car. Actually, it looked more like a skateboard than a car, but this invention sparked the beginning of the eventual development of electric vehicle technology. The first electric car, in the form of a cart with an electric motor, was created in 1841. It used to be initially that the range and speed of gas cars and EVs were roughly the same. The main disadvantage of an electric car was the complicated charging system. Back then, there were no advanced AC to DC converters, so charging was done in an extremely complex way. An AC electric motor was used for charging. It rotated the generator shaft, to which the batteries of the EV were connected. And although a relatively easy-to-use current rectifier was invented in 1906, this didn't significantly solve the problem of recharging. The Borland electric car set a record for the range per charge when it traveled 103 miles from Chicago to Milwaukee. The next day after recharging, the electric car returned to Chicago on its own. Its top speed was 35 miles an hour. EV popularity saw its ups and downs in U.S. history. Between 1900 and 1910, electric cars were more popular than gas cars. In fact, 38% of all cars had electric motors, whereas only 22% had gasoline engines. But as you know, thereafter the internal combustion engine grew in popularity. Then in the 1960s, interest in electric technology was revived due to environmental concerns, and also in the 1970s due to the oil crisis and sharp rise in fuel costs. But after 1982, interest in EVs waned again. By then, the oil market had changed, and there was a pilot batch production of electric cars that underperformed due to the lack of chemical energy sources. In recent years, with continued rise in oil prices, interest in electric vehicles has re-emerged in popularity. The Dieselgate environmental scandal with Volkswagen also pushed many car makers to start investing in electric technology. But now let's get to the heart of the electric car, the motors themselves. The modern electric motor works by the principle of electromagnetic induction. Electric Electromagnets are different than regular magnets. That's because they're made of coils of wire with electricity passing through. When the electric current moves through, it creates magnetic fields, so the coils behave like a magnet. With regular magnets, we all know that opposite poles attract and the same poles repel each other. But what's interesting with electromagnets is that its polarity can be changed depending on the direction of the current. So how does it work, and why do you need to reverse polarity? Imagine a horseshoe magnet, which is a U-shaped magnet. Let's say the top end of the magnet is the north and the bottom is the south. Now grab a second horseshoe magnet. If you were to bring both magnets toward each other, both with north on top, both magnets would repel each other. But if you flip one magnet so south is on top, well, now the opposite poles face each other and the two magnets will attract. Sounds pretty simple, right? But let's take it up a notch. Let's go back to the two magnets, each with north on top. But now the first magnet is a pole or shaft so that it can rotate on an axis. Then try bringing the second magnet closer. The first magnet tries to repel by rotating and spinning the axis. Now if you flip the second magnet again and again, in other words, you keep switching the poles, then the first magnet will keep on rotating. The electric motor works by a similar principle. The magnet that rotates acts as a rotor. The one that stays stationary is the stator. With electromagnets, it's possible to change poles by changing the direction of the electric current. That's why electric motors have permanent magnets on the rotor, but variable electric magnets on the stator. The stator has a series of windings, which are the wires that are placed within coils enclosed around a magnetic core. The windings get supplied with electric current, which creates a magnetic field to cause the rotors to move. The rotor speed depends on how frequently you switch the current from one stator winding to another. And that's the general operating principle behind electric motor. There are various types of electric motors that are used in electric vehicles. There is the DC series motor, which has high starting torque capability. This motor is most suitable for traction applications like railways. There's also the brushless DC motors, which is preferred by electric bicycle manufacturers. Tesla Model S used 3 electric motors. For example, one motor was an induction motor, also known as asynchronous motor. It's an AC electric motor in which the electric current is obtained by electromagnetic induction from the magnetic field of the stator winding. It is different from the DC motor because an alternating current is supplied to the stator, and there are no permanent magnets on the rotor. When the alternating current is applied to the stator winding, it creates a rotating magnetic field. This induces the rotor to spin, but the rotor rotates slower than the field, and that's why it's called asynchronous. When the rotation speed of the magnetic field and rotor become the same, the field stops creating induction in the rotor and it begins to slow down. Many car makers use permanent magnet synchronous motors on their cars. It's a type of AC electric motor where permanent magnets are embedded in the steel rotor to create the magnetic field. The rotor rotates completely symmetrical to the electromagnetic field. Most car makers use this type of motor for their battery EVs and hybrid EVs, for example, Toyota Prius, Chevrolet Bolt EV, Ford Focus Electric, Nissan Leaf, Honda Accord, and BMW i3. Electric cars use a regenerative braking system. Basically, when you brake, the system collects mechanical and kinetic energy and converts it back to electric current to recharge the battery. So the energy left the battery but now gets recuperated and returned to the car so it can reuse it. Pretty smart. So it goes like this. Say you're driving your electric vehicle and you fully release your foot on the gas. At that point, the traction motor starts working as a generator. Kinetic energy gets converted into electric energy and recharges the battery. This process also happens when a car is coasting, for example, down a hill. The advantage of this system is that it reduces the use of conventional brakes, so you have less wear and tear on the maintenance costs. You can see how recycling energy is a smart move. EVs have their share of downsides too, of course. Just as a regular gasoline car has to refuel its tank at a gas station, electric vehicles need to recharge at a charging station. And there are two important things to remember. First, the larger the battery capacity, the longer the range, but it also requires more time to recharge fully. So, if you are expecting to get a quick 5 to 8 minute refuel as you would on a conventional car, well, you're mistaken. Secondly, DC charging at dedicated stations is the most powerful and fastest option, but repeated use of fast charging will significantly shorten the life of the battery in the long run. By the way, a side note, low temperatures can actually affect the electric vehicle range. For now, the challenges that limit electric vehicles from dominating the car market include the shortage of charging stations, the limited ranges, and the high costs. Last year in 2020, more than 10 million electric vehicles were on the road worldwide. Compare that to 2016 when there were less than 2 million. Electric vehicles make up only 3% of the car market share right now, but its future seems more secure than conventional engines. If you enjoyed this episode, then please like the video.